Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the school board meeting for this afternoon. Our first item that we will have today is an attorney-client session. Ms. Rico.
Thank you. At this time, I request advice concerning pending litigation matters. The subject of the meeting shall be confined to settlement negotiations or strategy sessions related to litigation expenditures. Request the advice concerning the following case: Renaissance Charter School, Inc. versus School Board. It was a DOA case, number 16-5126 and 5157RX, and is now pending with the 4th District Court of Appeal as case number 17-2539. The persons attending the attorney-client session will be all board members, Dr. Fenoy, myself, district staff attorneys, as well as the court reporter. The session will be recorded by a court reporter, and no portion of the session will be off the record. The transcript of the sessions will be part of the district's public record at the conclusion of all stages of litigation. Thank you.
The board shall now begin the attorney-client session in Training Room A. The subject matter is related to the case that Ms. Rico just discussed and is expected to last approximately 30 minutes. Related to the case that we had.
Mr. Shaw?
So, Ms. Rico.
I'm sorry, there is a board item related to it on the agenda later on.
There will be
Yes.
action then
Thank you.
today. Sorry. At this time, I'd like to call a workshop to order and ask Mrs. Bass, please take the roll.
District 1, Barbara McQuinn.
Here.
District 2, Chuck Shaw.
Here.
District 3, Karen Brill. District 4, Erica Whitfield. District 5, Frank Barbieri.
Here.
District 6, Marcia Andrews.
Here.
District 7, Deborah Robinson.
Let the record show we have a quorum, and at this time, I'd like to ask Captain Mikowski to please lead us in the pledge to the flag. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Mikowski, for volunteering to do that.
Like to sing a national anthem?
Do you sing well? No. At this time, we have to make a very special announcement that today is Dr. Robinson's birthday, and we want to wish her a very happy birthday and to enjoy the cupcake that Mrs. Bass baked for her earlier this afternoon. So, our workshop items, Dr. Fenoy.
Yes, at this time, we'll have the legal team come forward with the legal policy workshop. Mr. Bruce Harris.
Thank you and good afternoon. We're here on policy 1.035, which is about policy presentation. And this policy addresses the manner in which we process new policies or revisions to policies before they are presented to you for approval. The proposed revisions reflect many of the practices that we're already using. The department assigned the policy is supposed to obtain input from other departments impacted by the policy and, time permitting, from an appropriate board advisory committee. And the Office of General Counsel must have reviewed the policy for legal sufficiency and any documents incorporated by reference. There's a form which you also have attached to the board agenda, which is 2139, which is the routing form, which must be signed by all required district staff and the Office of General Counsel, and this includes the superintendent signing. Leadership must approve, and the superintendent would make a recommendation that the board approve a policy or its revisions. The department assigned the policy works with the board clerk to provide the substance of the policy notice for postings, as well as the board report cover sheet and the policy and its revisions. And then if there are, at any time after the routing form has gone by, there are significant changes to the policy, there's another form that's routed to get signatures again from the district administrators and the Office of General Counsel, and the superintendent makes a recommendation to approve the revisions. And that's pretty much the process that's outlined here in policy presentation.
Any questions?
Questions?
All right, thank you, Mr. Harris.
Thank you.
Dr. Robinson.
So this is a wee bit philosophical and not procedural, right? So I just have this hang up with legal reviewing for legal sufficiency, right? It seems to me that legal should do more than that. Like, it seems to me that legal should understand the forward progress we're trying to make in whichever specific area, and should advise on how you can do that. Instead of just saying, yeah, that's okay, you know? Like, I'm reminded of the whole issue that had to do with alternative ed and young people coming out of incarceration, right? And, you know, legal had to say, okay, what are you trying to do to help children, and how can we assist you in getting that done, instead of just this legal sufficiency thing. So it's really philosophical, but I just need us to move forward, and I need legal to help us.
Okay, may I respond?
Ms. Rico.
So, in the world of the Office of General Counsel for the Palm Beach County School Board, legal sufficiency means your longer explanation and not a legal checklist where it complies with statute. We do look for statutory compliance, policy compliance, user-friendliness, does it make sense? We work closely with district stakeholders, external stakeholders, et cetera, in the process. So we do, on a variety of content levels, perform legal sufficiency reviews, but they are quite broad, and they take into more consideration, we very well aware and appreciate and strive to meet the mark of the board's interest in making sure that legal review is a comprehensive, shoulder-to-shoulder, everybody at the table review of what we're trying to accomplish, the vision and mission statement of the board, strategic plan, financial considerations, philosophy of the board, et cetera. So we really do have a broad approach to it, and it isn't just a little checklist to see if, you know, the statutes are complied with. Now, sometimes we may miss the mark on identifying what the end goal is. So I think it's subject to further review and confer, but we do approach it in that vein.
So my request is that we just look at different wording, because legal sufficiency does not say that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Harris, thank you very much. Our next topic is academic policy update. Dr. Fenoy.
Yes, at this time, I would like to bring forward Deputy Superintendent Keith Oswald, another birthday boy, Mark Howard, Cheryl Baker, and Bruce Harris again. Yes, today is his birthday. To discuss policy 2.09, school advisory councils.
Knew I liked you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, sir. And good afternoon, board members, and joining us also, we have Cheryl Baker, manager with school improvement. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Howard, the birthday boy.
Good afternoon, Chairman Shaw, board members, and Dr. Fenoy. Brief update on policy 2.09, which is our district policy governing school advisory councils and their role in the school improvement plan. And the purpose for updating this policy is really threefold. There's been some minor revisions to align with state statutory language, alignment with our own strategic plan, and decision-making procedures by the SAC within each school. First of all, in terms of SAC procedures, the update to the policy really just requires that each of the SAC codify in their bylaws decision-making procedures. They make a lot of procedures, so it's really just making sure that whatever decision-making procedures have been identified and are clear to all of the membership. Secondly, this is really an update to the policy to align with practice, but it really is around SAC membership composition and gives the kind of the superintendent's designee, which is typically the regional office, permission to help with placing membership if needed on the SAC, if they don't have sufficient SAC membership, or if the composition isn't representative of the community it serves. Also, Section 8, the purpose of that is to align with a change in language, a small change around the sacrifice of veterans and the value of the Medal of Honor. The statute changed, so our policy was updated. That second bullet point really clearly states in statute now that the school improvement plan will have alignment to the strategic plan. And that third gives us flexibility in the timeline. We know that the board likes to review those. Previously, this had a mentioned December in the timeline for board approval, but this gives us the flexibility to adjust that, to still get to the board, but meet any DOE requirements. The next section, Section 9, is around waivers when they're necessary. And Section 11 around the budget is really just, there was a lot of unnecessary language in the old policy or the current policy, and it was really just clarifying the role of the SAC and the limitations of the SAC in the school budget for purpose of the school improvement plan. Take any questions at this time.
Any questions? I have one related to the bylaws. Does the district have a copy of the bylaws of every school's SAC committee, and how do we monitor that? Ms. Baker, I see you shaking your head. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I'll let Ms. Baker answer that question.
Yes, the schools turn in their bylaws every year. They update and turn them in. They're approved by the SACs. And our regional directors and instructional support teams review the bylaws, and that's how they're monitored. They're monitored and reviewed by the regional support teams, and then they're posted on our website and accessed through our website, our school improvement website.
All right, any other questions? Dr. Robinson?
Not a question, but would you, could you send us the template for the school improvement plans, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you. One of my big things that I talk about a lot with the school improvement committees is the time. You know, they start at all times of the day. And I'm just wondering, when you all are looking at these plans, if you find that it's not representative, has a representation of the community, the school itself, do you step in to make sure that you work with the SAC to kind of make sure that they get that straight? They may need some help from you, but if you're looking at a SAC and it doesn't really correlate with the student population in the community, before they get started with all of this throughout the year, do you work it? And because many times, the different times that it starts, it eliminates people from being able to participate. Can you help me with that?
Yes, ma'am. That's a good question. The statute and policy requires that the SAC be representative of the community that it serves. So we do monitor that, and we have an EDW report that looks at the percentage, and it's basically a compliance report. If we see that's out of compliance, our office will reach out to the school just to talk about what steps are being taken. And then finally, when we see that maybe that's not being resolved after a particular period of time, we work with the regional or instructional superintendent to work with the school to make sure. As you know, SAC membership is fluid throughout the year. And so, but that is something that we monitor and have a report that reports back. But typically, and that's what this policy says, is the superintendent's designee, which is typically the regional instructional superintendent, has the authority to impose themselves in helping with that compliance.
All right, Dr. Robinson?
So just to follow up on that, so what you monitor is membership or participation, or both?
Actually, both. Participation through the EDW report, but then their attendance. Cheryl, you want to mention about the attendance?
Yeah, there's requirements by state statute regarding attendance as well. And so that's monitored as well.
May I follow? So, okay, so I, along with, with Mrs. Andrews, with this concern about the timing of the SAC meetings, because it does seem like it automatically would exclude a number of people. And so in your monitoring, do you find that that is not true? That people, that parents specifically are able to participate in these SAC meetings that occur at 9 a.m. and so forth?
So the attendance at each school varies depending upon, so we have autonomy at each school. Each school has autonomy as to when they hold their meetings and how they hold their meetings based on what's acceptable at that particular school site. And so the regional executive directors and the regional instructional support teams monitor that, and it's based off of what's acceptable at that school. And what we monitor is how many times they meet. There's certain, by state statutes, how many times is acceptable for them to meet. And
Yep, I was just going to say, Dr. Robinson and board, I think I would feel more comfortable if you had a little time to research this and then come back in writing to the board, after a little bit of time.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Barbieri?
Yeah, Mr. Shaw, I would like to see some kind of report on because I go to try and get to all the SAC meetings in the 21 schools in my district, and it's some are in the morning, some are right after school, some are later in the evening. I'd like to see how that's working throughout the district, because I agree that if some of the meetings are held at the wrong time, they're not going to get because I've been to some schools where there's very little participation. So maybe the board could see what it looks like throughout the entire district, and we can come to some kind of agreement that they'll be held at a certain time to make sure that we get maximum participation, because they're worthless unless you have the people that are supposed to be there making those decisions. So.
Okay.
okay.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you. Just to follow up, not to give anybody any more work, but when you really try to get a time, it's not going to work for everybody.
Right.
And maybe one of the things that the SAC committee could do is, when they recognize they're not pulling from the many parts of the population that they would like to pull from, could they kind of do something where they change a time or have a program in the evening to address what's gone on in SAC for maybe the first quarter in the evening for anybody that can come? Because if you really just don't come, you never really get it. Maybe they do send the newsletter home and you get a bit of information, but people do like to be touched. And so maybe if they're going to have it whatever time they're going to have it, there could be an optional piece where maybe quarterly they can have something in the evening, or if they're doing it in the morning, to have a way to kind of interface anybody that wants to come and find out what's going on with SAC, because there could be some voluntary things that they may want to get help with. Just another component of it once they kind of set the time.
So I think what I'm hearing is we need to go back and do a little research on the current state, what the attendance looks like and so forth, and then provide that back in writing to the board. Okay.
All right, just one final, and this one, yes or no, is probably okay. Does the district monitor charter school SAC committee issues?
I'm not sure if Mr. Pegg or D. Pasquale is able to answer that question. From my office, we do not.
All right, you could just get back to us on
Okay.
that one. So,
Check.
all right. Because, and the reason I ask that question is I believe that in some cases, the governing board of the charter school serves as a SAC committee for those schools,
Yeah.
which could put it in conflict with the issue of not having local board members involved. So that's why I think
Understood.
it's important
Okay,
for us to
thank
have
you.
that information. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we are done. Our next item is discussion items. Dr. Robinson?
We have one more workshop.
One more? Oh, okay.
So 5.725, ESC policies and procedures. I'm going to ask Mr. McCormick, Ms. Thornton to join me up here, who will be workshopping this policy, and Ms. Fetterman. And Ms. Pincus. Mr. McCormick?
Good afternoon.
We're reviewing a couple of the minor changes in the ESE policy for this year. First, it would be the restraint data. The plan to reduce restraints are also updated. The district plan to increase participation of underrepresented students in the gifted program. The data that goes along with that. BPI assessment. BPI stands for Best Practices for Inclusive Education. There is a law 3 years ago that came into play that requires all schools, including the school district, to have best practices for inclusion education self-assessment. The district went through it last year. Schools will be going through it this year. Small changes in wording. That's all pre-populated by the Florida Department of Education and Bureau of Exceptional Student Education, and then the recording of IEP meetings with documentation of disability.
Mrs. Brill?
Thank you. And so I'd like to talk about the recording of IEP meetings because over the recent years, it's become a contentious issue. It wasn't when my children were young, but just to give you some background, you know, especially in elementary school, when a parent goes to the table for an IEP meeting, it's very emotional. And you know, in the past, it used to be if a parent said, I want to record it, we would tell the district in advance, and the district would record it. And back in those days, it really wasn't used as a gotcha. I know that for myself, I'd walk into an IEP meeting with 30 people in the room, and then there was me. And, you know, it was very hard being so stressed out, trying to focus on everything. So I know the state doesn't say that we have to allow it, but we can allow ourselves to be more liberal with regard to it. I'd like to see us have something where if a parent requests or the district requests the recording of an IEP meeting, that it be permitted, because it doesn't have to be a gotcha, but I know for me also, my ex-husband couldn't attend the meetings. He wanted to hear what went on in those meetings. Back in those days, we used cassette recorders. I know those aren't around anymore. But it was extremely helpful in having him feel a part of my son's education. So I'd like that to be considered. I know that, you know, at times it's been used in adversarial relationships, but there's also, I don't want those adversarial relationships to dictate what we do for parents who really, and for staff that really want to be able to have something that they can go back to and be able to also share with people who are involved in the child's caregiving. So I'm putting that out there. I went through the 182 pages and I couldn't find where it was, just perusing it. So if that's, I don't know when that's coming back to us, but if it's not right away, if you could please take that into consideration and perhaps speak with me directly if there's concerns.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Discussion item, Dr. Robinson, countywide Wi-Fi.
Yep, thank you. I mentioned this briefly at our retreat, but I think it's time that we revisit the issue of countywide Wi-Fi access, especially as we move more and more down this path of internet being such an educational tool and actually being internet access being required. And so we need to make sure that all of our children are able to access the internet after school and on weekends. And so this is a request that we direct staff to outline a plan which will include other governmental agencies, businesses, and community partners to create a countywide Wi-Fi so that all students can access educational platforms. We need to find the people that were involved in the effort a decade or so ago. And so we learn those lessons, that we don't revisit whatever problems might have occurred, and we can bypass whatever roadblocks existed. And I also understand that there's an initiative in Miami-Dade, and we need to research that as well. But I just think we need to move forward and bring all the partners to the table and get going. So that, because, you know, some people, we're still doing the, what do you call it, the digital divide project, but we give young people laptops and people, you know, donate devices, but then they can't access the internet. So we need to remedy that.
Ms. Whitfield?
Thank you. I love this idea. I think it's great. I just wanted to share with the group, after Dr. Robinson brought that up last week, I did reach out to the CRA director in Lake Worth, and she had been working on this project. So she sent me a bit of information about it. There's some grants out there right now that are specifically targeted at increasing Wi-Fi on a larger level, and also they have been very interested in doing this in the city there, so they've got some experience going through this. It didn't actually end up happening, so I think there's more that can be learned from that there, but I wanted to let you know I did share that information with Amity, so hopefully she will have that to work forward.
Mrs. Brill?
Thank you. And thinking about our lobbying and our platform, you know, my thought is that maybe in specific areas, we can get our legislative delegation to go after some money from the legislature, particularly for some of the areas that are in high need, where we really don't have it. So I think that we should make a note to add that to our platform.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you, and I do believe we have to go out and find those folks that did a lot of work on that. Jody Gleason, former school board member Jody Gleason, was a leader in that effort. We were really trying to get something going in the Glades region, and it's kind of now stopped. So we need to find, somebody needs to go back and find out who the key players were, because a lot had been done. A lot had been done, I think, in the Pleasant City area. And so as a result, we need to find out what has happened and what needs to happen. We know, because we need the help for our children, and how we can be totally involved as a school district. So I think this is very necessary.
And Dr. Fenoy, I can give you the names of a couple of the people who were involved with the Ed Commission back when that started, so to get a hold of. Plus, I think we can also probably get a hold of Jody Gleason, too. I think there's some people who know where she lives. All right, thank you very much. Our next topic.
I have one comment.
Yeah, Dr. Fenoy.
So definitely staff will look into this, and we will, if you could get us all of the former contacts, and we'll start working on that. But in the meantime, I had the privilege of touring Palm Beach County library system yesterday in Wellington. And what was very interesting, families can actually check out internet Wi-Fi and take it home and use it for a period of 3 weeks and then have that renewed. So there is access. The library system has now purchased internet hotspots that families can check out on their own. So that's just some information to be shared.
That may give a great opportunity on that one. Yeah. Our next discussion item, Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. I wanted to bring this up because I've been having conversations with some people who come to the board meetings that we have here frequently that talk about our opportunities for infusion through African American studies and into all of our curriculum. And I think after going to speak to our employee, Brian Knowles, who works here, and he is the manager over African American infusion, gender studies, and Latino studies, I realized that I think it would be beneficial for all of us to learn a little bit more about how they're doing that and possibly to have a workshop on it. So I wanted to bring it to the group here and see if anybody else would find value in learning a little bit more about how we're complying with this state mandate.
Mrs. Brill, Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. And so I think that statute is 1003.42, and it includes a whole bunch of things. In addition to those, the history of the Holocaust. So we would need the Holocaust education added, but it's got some other stuff that I still would like to hear how we're doing it. And this isn't to minimize what you're saying, because I completely agree, but it's that includes the study of women's contributions to the United States, the nature of and importance of free enterprise. It even goes into kindness to animals, etc. So I would like us to look at the statute, pull out the stuff that's really, it also includes, Dr. Fenoy, the use of alcohol and drugs. So it's a very, and I saw you looking surprised, so, but don't mean to call you out, but it's, but I think it's a very broad statute, but I think it's very important that we look at how we're implementing these pieces, because they encompass so much. So thank you.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you. And Ms. Whitfield, thank you. We've been to several meetings. I know I have been out in the community working with the group as it relates to African American infusion, gender studies, all of these things that's been going on here in the district for a while. And I'm happy that we have our new director here that's actually working it. And I appreciate what Mrs. Brill says, but I really don't want one workshop. I think all of these pieces need to be brought forth, and we have active participation in our community with getting the community involved with helping parents and community as it relates especially to the African-American Infusion Program. Brother Carl comes and speaks to us almost every board meeting. He's invited us as a group, and you all have responded. I saw Ms. Whitfield. I'm seeing others of you responding. I just really want whatever workshop we have, especially for that one, that we include some of the community to the table for them to kind of share with us some of their thoughts. I know what we're doing here at the district. I've followed it. I see some things that we need to kind of strengthen. But, I mean, we are looking at people out in the community saying something totally different from what we're actually thinking that we're doing. So whatever workshop, I'm asking this board to make sure that there's some community input at the table for that presentation. Surely the board presentation, but some community input of those leaders out in the community working that component.
Any other, Mrs. Brill?
It's funny that you mentioned at the table. Dr. Robinson will probably remember this when they wrote the inclusion policy. We actually had a real workshop. We sat around the table, and I participated as a community member, but we actually had give and take with the community around the table. And I know that times are different. We talk about security, but at some point I would like to see us be able to have one of those interactive workshops once again.
All right. Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. So just so that you know, I was contacted by former Senator Tony Hill, who is the chair of the state's task force for African American Studies, and they are doing, they want to do a mini institute here. And so we have scheduled for Saturday, November 9th, I think it is. It's the Saturday after the election, I know that, and at Atlantic High School. So we will be having that forum and a reception the night before. It appears it will be at Spady Museum, and it will be on infusion. And I just want to be really, really clear, because a lot of people do not understand what infusion is. And this is exactly the reason that I give a Black History fact at every board meeting except in February, and I will stop when we actually start infusing. And so infusion does not mean that you have a separate class or you have lessons on Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks in the month of February. It means that the contributions of the group of people that you're talking about is mixed in, if you will, to the curriculum. It's seamlessly in there. The story of African people, the story of Jewish people, the story of women, the story of Native Americans is in there without separation. The story is just told, as I try to say, 360 degrees. Now, I'm fine with having whatever workshop. I've been at this way too long. I think we need to focus. I don't want us to just have another conversation. We need to talk about why infusion is not happening, right? And so if you want to have that conversation, I'm happy to have it. Okay, and I'm gonna put a period there. I won't.
Mrs. Andrews?
I really do believe we need that workshop. I do know that we need to have a deeper discussion, but as I've been on this board for 8 years, and I've been working a lot of these pieces along with you, Dr. Robinson, and the rest of the board members, I think we do need to have that conversation together right here in this format with some community involvement and dig a lot deeper. So I don't want us to lose that piece of that.
All right, any other discussion? Thank you very much. Since the last two items have, these last two items had some deliverables that we need to do. So one of them will be, and both of them for staff to look at a plan for Wi-Fi countywide, and then to address this issue and how we schedule workshop and what it would look like and stuff. Our next discussion item, Mr. Barbieri.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Shaw. I'm sure Mrs. Brill is aware of this one because she's taking the heat, no pun intended, also with respect to the students from her district that attend Olympic Heights High School. But I just wanted to make the board aware of a situation and ask for some discussion on how we rectify it. As all of you know, there's 180 days in a school year. That's 36 weeks of school. Over a 5-year period, there's 180 weeks in a 5-year period of school. There were 210 Tririga work orders for the Olympic Heights air conditioning system, which is more than 1 per week, every week for the last 5 years. That's the average. That does not include the emergency calls that went into the central administration to get emergency help down there, because those aren't work orders. They're not logged into Tririga, my understanding. So we can expect that there's somewhere well in excess of 210 times that the air conditioning system at Olympic Heights High School was failing in some regard and had to have some work done on it. Last week it was out 2 times. The air conditioning was down at that school. On Thursday, over 40 children went to the clinic complaining of heat-related illness feelings and went home. And I understand on Friday from the parent calls that a lot of parents didn't send their kids to school until the AC system, they could be assured that the AC system was working. Last week, the teachers opened windows to allow the warm air from outside to come into the classrooms, because even though it was 90 degrees outside, that was cooler air than what they were experiencing in the classroom. Some of the teachers actually took their classes down to the courtyard outside in order to have cooler temperatures than in the school building. Under the penny sales tax, if you look at the list, the AC system at Olympic Heights is not scheduled to be replaced until the years 2022 to 2024, which is 4 years from now. There's no way that this district should put those students and those teachers through having to work in a school that has constant air conditioning problems. So I'd like the board to discuss moving that up on the sales tax list so that we get immediate attention to that school, so that we don't fix it. Every time it's a call that the switch is, trip because of the overload from FP&L. Supposedly they took care of that 2 years ago. It's happening again. It burns out the switch. We have to get a new switch installed. The system goes down. After it's repaired, it takes hours to recool down the school. In the meantime, we have children in the school that can't concentrate. So I wanted to bring it to the board's attention. I don't know if you have those issues in other schools, but I'm sure Mrs. Brill and I have been putting up with a lot of complaints from the parents and teachers and students at Olympic Heights, and something needs to be done rather than, I know the district's doing everything it can to repair these, and I understand there's not enough technicians to get out to all the schools, and maybe we need to hire an outside repair company to come in and fix these things on an emergency basis. But I'm at my wit's end with how to deal with this situation at Olympic Heights. It's over 2,000 students, and I need some of your discussion to see how we fix this. Thank you.
Mrs. Brill?
Thank you. And so obviously, I completely agree that we should move it up. I don't know, for whatever reason, I didn't get any phone calls. The only thing that I did have, and I do want to commend the school, one of my neighbors, when I was outside, told me, did you hear that the AC was out? Her son has a heart condition, and so she called the nurse, and they made sure to have Gatorade for him so that he'd be all right. But I completely agree. I just think that the parents in my district are just so grateful that their kids go to Olympic Heights. They don't want to say anything about it to me, but I do know it's been a recurring problem. I do think that in this particular instance, we need to bump it up, and if other instances in other schools where, especially when it affects children's health and their ability to learn, and also the staff, having to work under those conditions. So anything that we're able to do, I would completely support.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you, Mr. Barbieri and Mrs. Brill. I thoroughly support it. I was walking the school at Pahokee High School on last Friday, and the children and the school, the air conditioning went out. They were trying to get to lunch. Luckily, the region superintendent was there. The maintenance people had been there an hour before they could get back to the West Area office. The thing had conked out. I don't know if this is going on everywhere. I just really want to know. I just happened to be there that day, and everybody was in a panic to get somebody out there to fix the air conditioning system for that school. So we really need to prioritize, and we need to have I want to know what's going on with these schools and the air conditioning pieces of the puzzle. I think it's just a piecemeal, seems like it. If it's breaking down every time you look around, that's not going to work. We need to get it repaired.
Mrs. Whitfield?
May I ask if we can have response from staff on this? I would really like to hear. Thank you.
Dr. Fenoy?
Yes, Ms. Paul will come up and discuss our plans moving forward.
Good afternoon. So to address the Olympic Heights issue, I've spoken with Mr. Barbieri previously. What we see, and let me be clear in terms of the events at Olympic Heights, 1991, they had an old chiller. It was replaced in 2005. This type of chiller is 2005. This type of chiller is expected to last 30 years. So this chiller, the two chillers and the smaller chiller there, they're not within half of their life cycle. So what I've asked our facilities director, Stacy Marshall, who's here, to kind of look at when the chillers went down and what were the circumstances. One of the things she found was that when the chillers went down, there was a voltage drop on the FPNL side, so the voltage coming into the system dropped. I am not assured that if we were to replace these chillers with new chillers, that we wouldn't have the same situation. So what we have now is we're working with FPNL to put a more sensitive monitor on that. We've had instances, and I haven't been here that long, but I understand in the past we've had instances where FPNL had to go out and replace an entire transformer. And so I think it would be prudent for us to do the research to find out exactly why the chillers are tripping. Every time there's a power surge or power goes out, it requires someone to come physically on site to start the chillers back up. In addition, you have several different types of chillers at a school. So the ones that are at the high school are the big, massive office building type chillers. They have systems in place to shut them down if there's an electrical issue. And so, again, it requires someone to manually come out and start it back up and make sure that it's safe as it starts back up. So we still have some work to do on Olympic Heights to find out the root cause of why the chiller is tripping. But there should be an expectation when you have a power outage in your home and stuff that it takes a while to get the power back up. It's kind of the same thing with our chillers. It takes us some time to get it back up. One thing I would say with the principals, with our principals, is that they have been really great in communicating with us when these events happen, so that we can have someone out there to make sure that the school is okay. It's unfortunate, and we all regret what happened in terms of Olympic Heights, because it's very uncomfortable for our kids and our staff to be in that kind of situation. But I think it would be prudent and fiscally responsible to do the research to find out exactly what's causing the chiller to shut down at that particular school.
Mrs. Andrews, and then Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. Just to follow up with the Pahokee issue, Dr. Avosa can attest to it. We had graduation one year and no air. This past year, I had my fingers crossed that the air conditioning system would be working. I need you to go and do some follow-up with Pahokee High School. Something's wrong out there. Every time I go, there's something wrong with mold. The air conditioning, the whole system out there needs to be looked at. Thank you.
Mrs. Whitfield?
I just wanted to follow up on one of the comments you made about how this is tied in with the FPL issue. Is this occurring at other schools then as well when there's a power surge?
Yes, yes, and also when there is a power outage. So we see this when we have extensive rain, a power is out in a region, and it just depends on what grid the school happens to be on, whether the school is impacted. It's no different than at your home.
I just wanted to say one quick thing, just to continue to follow up on what Mrs. Brill said about the health concerns. Obviously, that is the most important, and I do feel for Mr. Barbieri having to receive calls from parents having those health concerns. We have to prioritize if we have children in a school. That can be very uncomfortable if the AC goes out and we just built these buildings so you can never have air really come through them. But I do think we should stick to the natural process of allowing you to do your research on this. I would like to make sure that we are prioritizing, with
Absolutely.
health and safety being the number one priority for our students. But I would like to have you go through your normal process to find out what that is.
And I must say, we do have a very aggressive replacement plan for chillers that have outlived their useful life cycle. So I'll be happy to provide that to the board so you can kind of see what the schedule is. But when we have a series of events with a chiller that is not nearly half of its life cycle, then I think that requires us to be very prudent in terms of identifying the problem, because if we don't identify the root cause of the problem, we put brand new equipment, millions of dollars of equipment in and replace it, and then we end up in the same space. So I just want to make sure that we do our due diligence, and we have monitors that we're placing on the school with FPNL, more sensitive monitors, so we can see when those surges happen exactly what the pattern is, and then work with FPNL to get a solution to it.
Dr. Fenoy and then Mr. Barbieri.
Yes, Mr. Paul, could you also speak to some of your team's plans with providing maintenance agreements, having a hybrid approach due to the fact that we have not been able to fill so many HVAC positions, the realities of the aging workforce as it relates to people who can actually fix that, and then also your conversations with HR about doing an assessment of the salary schedule for those positions.
So, I think it takes a village with the HVAC situation across the state, not just within our district. And the reality is that our workforce is aging, and we have quite a few retirements that are coming up within the next 5 years. As of today, we have 8 vacancies in HVAC techs. So I'm exploring the possibility of doing a hybrid approach. We'll start with Olympic Heights, where we're working with one of our manufacturers to do an assessment of the Olympic Heights chillers and come back with us action plan for this. So in addition to having our in-staff personnel, our HVAC techs, we're looking at a hybrid approach of having a manufacturer or another company to partner with us to service our equipment as we go through these vacancies and so forth. And it is my intent also to work with our HR department to see what we can do in terms of making our salaries for HVAC techs more competitive. They can get $100,000 a year out on the market as opposed to working for us for $30,000 and $40,000. So, one of the things we talked about too is just kind of partnering with Palm Beach State College to see, work with them, work with our students while they're in our schools to train them towards HVAC, and then when they go to State College, get their certifications and so forth, and then hopefully we can lure them in here to work for us. And our apprenticeship program is a real key to doing that as we go forward.
Mr. Barbieri?
Let Marcia go first.
Mrs.
Yes,
Andrews?
I just want you to look at West Tech.
Absolutely.
We've had HVAC training there for the last 5 years, graduating quite a few people. So if you could go through that list so that we can find those adults who've actually completed the training, I'd like for them to be working for the school district.
Absolutely. We
Mr.
would like that
Barbieri.
too.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Shaw. Mrs. Paul's been very responsive. She and I have been dealing with this for weeks now, so I appreciate the fact. But I just want to make sure that the board realizes, I heard one of you say, let's do it in the normal course of, there's been 210 work orders over 180 weeks. So, this is a critical issue for health and safety of those children in that school. It's not something that we just put off as a maintenance item in the future. I also want you to know that at the Audit Committee meeting last Thursday, I brought this issue to the attention of the Audit Committee. The Audit Committee has authorized the Inspector General to do an investigation as to whether or not there's a breach of warranty, whether the equipment was faulty when it was installed, so that come back to the board with a report as to whether or not there's been any problems with that AC system that wasn't the district's fault, or maybe was the district's fault. But in any event, replacing chillers that are not 30 years old with new chillers because they're failing, hopefully there's a warranty on those, and I'm asking legal to make sure when we buy new chillers and things like that, we figure out a way to either have these contractors bond this off for the life of the equipment, or especially major purchases like chillers that cost us millions of dollars, or we get warranties that are enforceable, so we can require them to come and replace or fix or replace. So we don't go through this at other schools when we start replacing, because I looked at some of the other schools on the list, and there's other ones that are scheduled to get chillers and things like that, and there should be warranties, so we have somebody to go back on when after 15 years of chillers failing that had a 30-year life expectancy.
Mrs. Paul.
And that's one of and I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Barbieri. That's one of the things that we're doing is going forward to make sure that we purchase a substantive warranty to help us along the way with repairing the chillers and the competition in the market for qualified technicians for this. So we are definitely doing that. It's more expensive to do it, obviously, but we think as we go forward, it's the best course of action to follow.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? All right, this is Dr. Robinson.
You know, like I'm having a flashback. It seemed that we learned this lesson before. So I don't know as well, I guess if IG is going to look at it, it seems that I thought our contracts were tighter than what it sounds like that they are. I mean, so it's two things. One, I'm glad that you are investigating the cause of the problem. And to whatever degree it's FP&L, we need to like have a meeting of the minds with FP&L, right? Because they have a lot of money. They need to fix some things as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, but the other thing is if it's truly a failure of the chiller, I thought that our contracts were already tight enough based on previous experience that if they were failing, it was their fault, that it's in there, we can go after the manufacturer to recoup the dollars. But having said that, let me get to the other point I want to make is that I do agree that we need to prioritize, if we need to reorder the chiller repairs, replacements based upon the number of times they've gone down, I think that we should do that. I mean,
And I think we have,
Okay.
in certain cases where we have complete failures. And so we have quite a bit of the sales tax money set aside for that. And those are the first ones up where they're just repeated failures or they've outlived their useful life cycle. So we've done that, but there's always an outlier in anything that you do. The warranties, one of the things, again, we're focused on, the warranty is only good for a certain period of time. And if the issue that causes the chiller to fail is a natural event, such as a power outage or storm or something like that, then that's not really a warranty issue. That's just us coming back out and making sure that we bring the equipment back up in a safe manner. And so we got to make sure that we're looking apples to apples.
So there are a couple of very complex things that Ms. Paul and her team need to research for the board. So we will bring that information back. We'll work with Julianne to look at some of the past warranty issues moving forward. And then I think the only thing that I will say to the board as we have these failures in some of the equipment and the schedule, remember the referendum dollars are stretched over 10 years. And so we have to be very, very mindful of when we move things up, what comes off. And so I just want you all to understand that. So that's part of this process. If something goes up, something comes off. And that's just a conversation that we'll have with the board moving forward.
Ms. Rico and then Mrs. Brill.
No, I wanted to respond to the discussion about the contracts and warranties and to ensure, it has not been brought to my attention that there was any failure of the warranties or inadequacies with the language. However, I've just assigned my staff to gather together all of the items, contracts that go with the items under discussion, and we'll do a very thorough review of the times, the dates, the language, and where we are with that, so that we have assist with a comprehensive package in that regard.
Mrs.
Thank
Brill.
you.
Thank you, and I think we all understand that something's going to come off when we bump something up, and, there's an understanding that air conditioning is vital to have, especially when it's been as hot as it's been. But, I'm thinking about it, and I live on the same grid as Hagan Road Elementary. We lose our electric all the time. We were out for hours a few weeks ago, and we were Facebooking with the people out in the canyons that go down to Olympic Heights. Well, Hagan Road had air conditioning. So there's something wrong somewhere, whether it is the chiller or FPL, but we lose our electricity at least once a month where I live. And we're on the same grid. Now, I know it's a smaller chiller in the elementary school, but I do think that we need to get on top of this. I'm with Mr. Barbieri, not only because it's kids from my district go there, but it's just, I can't imagine being in that building without air conditioning, period. And I look forward to the updates.
Mr. Barbieri.
Yeah, I hate to beat a dead horse, but in 2016, FP&L discovered that they needed to do something at that school, and I was told that they came into that school and they replaced something so that
I
these...
believe that's the transformer.
Okay,
that
they were fixing something so that the constant interruptions to the chillers would stop, and obviously, whatever FP&L did two years ago didn't work. So, just keep that in mind if we're going to get FP&L out there. Remind them that they told us 2 years ago that they were fixing the problem, and it's not fixed. And I'm very aware of exactly what went on because I've been there at that school over and over again for the last 6 years dealing with this. So I know exactly what I'm talking about. So make sure that you get the complete story from FP&L when you meet with them because
Absolutely.
they did try and fix this once.
Dr. Robinson?
And my last point is also recruit from Riviera Beach Prep. Because, no, seriously, because I shook the hands of 150 people who completed the pre-apprenticeship program there in the construction trades. All were not HVAC, but all of them we need, right? So we should recruit from them as well.
And just so you know, we have $37 million scheduled for HVAC in FY19. So we've moved money forward to take care of a lot of the issues we have with it. And again, the referendum is over 10 years, and we're trying to focus on the priorities as you suggested. So again, I just want to be responsible in the sense that we find out what the real issue is at Olympic Heights and work accordingly. So I'll be keeping you informed on that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have to make a comment. And, this discussion we have, and it's one that this board has had for years and years and years. And it's unfortunate that some of the needs that we have to take care of these projects have to be talked about on reordering projects and everything because we don't have the funding. A lot of these issues can be placed right straight back on the state legislature for what has happened to school districts over the last 10 or 15 years and the failure of the legislature to provide for capital outlay and maintenance needs. So with that, thank you very much, Mrs. Paul. Dr. Robinson.
So I just want to clarify. So when things get reordered, right, and to your point, if something is moved up, something's moved back, then that is presented to us as part of the capital plan update, correct? And it goes to the oversight committee.
Well, it's presented to ISOC, and they provide a recommendation to the board. I think that's how it works.
Okay, so I'm glad I mentioned it, because it does also come as part of the capital plan update. I mean, but it also should be highlighted. But I think that when the proposal for that change is going to be made, that the board needs to be alerted. We need to be told, this is moving up,
Absolutely.
this perfect example, this is moving up. The best way we see to get this done is to move this back a year, and here's your FYI. Right.
Yeah, we work very closely with Leanne in Treasury as well as Mike Burke. So, we just don't move things around at will. There is a process we go through.
Right, which
And
must
the
include
board
the
is
board.
informed of that. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. That concludes our workshop items. So at this time, we'll adjourn the workshop and move to the special meeting. Let the record show that all 7 board members are still here. Our first item is the approval of minutes. We have 7 minutes to be approved. Is there a motion to approve items 1 through 7? Motion by Mrs. Whitfield, second by Mrs. Andrews. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, all opposed, motion carries 7-0. We have one item that was added, DS1. Dr. Fenoy, is there anything else that needs to be added?
No, sir, I'm not adding anything.
All right, and this item was added for good cause, since there is no time delay in providing the behavior mental health services to students. This is a contract that we just were able to, staff able to negotiate, so this was put on the agenda today to get this one started. We have one item that has been withdrawn, CS3. Dr. Fenoy, anything else to withdraw?
No, sir, not at this time.
And the board has pulled items CS1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Are there any other items anybody would like to pull? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda? Motion by Dr. Robinson, seconded by Mrs. Brill. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Are there any abstentions or disclosures? Seeing none, we'll move to superintendent and board comments. Dr. Fenoy.
Good afternoon. October is National Bullying Prevention Month, and I am so proud of our schools for planning lessons and activities to raise awareness for this important topic. I want to remind all of us, it costs us nothing to be kind to one another, and kindness is a standard we should all adhere to each day. We've got great news from the Department of Risk and Benefits. Director Diane Howard was named the 2018 Risk All-Star by Risk and Insurance magazine. The award noted her accomplishments in dealing with Lloyd's of London to customize insurance coverage to meet the needs of the district and our many employees. Congratulations, Diane. I'd also like to congratulate and welcome the district's new Director of Communications, Ms. Claudia Shea. I'm sure you all have interacted with Claudia over her 5-year tenure at the Education Network, and we are very pleased that she will now bring her experience and leadership to our communications department. Congratulations, Claudia. District high schools participated in National Voter Registration Day on September the 28th. Thanks to the collaboration of both district employees and volunteers, 1,938 high school students are now officially registered to vote. And finally, speaking of voting, while they may be too young to vote in the November election, students at Wellington Landings Middle School are studying the upcoming election in their social studies classes. Part of the lesson includes family discussions of the candidates and issues that will be on the November 6th ballot. The students will hold a school-wide election on November the 1st, where they can cast their votes for the governor, senators, and of course, the district's referendum. I am certain I am not the only one who is anxiously awaiting the update from Principal Blake Bennett with their results. Board, those are the comments that I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Board member comments? Mrs. McQuinn.
I actually have good news, and I actually have so much good news that I'm going to save a little bit for the next meeting. First, though, there are on the agenda, we are approving 2 of my appointments to district committees. The first is the ABC Attendance Boundary Committee, and I want to share with you that Mrs. Kathy Salvador is a North County resident. More importantly, she and her husband are the parents of 4 children in 4 different of our Palm Beach County schools, so she should have some great input. She's also the director, and I'll read this, of Environmental Licensing and Permitting for NextEra Energy. So we bring a very qualified, enthusiastic member to that committee. Also, to our Technology Advisory Committee is Mr. Dwayne Taylor, who is the Manager of Technology Services and Instruction for the Center for Creative Education, better known as CCE, and I have the privilege of serving on that board for our board. Prior to his position at CCE, Mr. Taylor was with the City of West Palm Beach Youth Empowerment Center, where he developed and managed the digital literacy program that was part of helping to reduce youth crime in the Northwood area by 25%. So we're very excited to welcome him to our Technology Advisory Committee. Next point, I had the privilege of introducing Dr. Fenoy to another board that Ms. Whitfield kindly gave to me when I came on the board, and that was Families First. For those of you who don't know about Families First, they are located offices across the street from us. I'm sure I'm pointing in the wrong direction. Also in Wellington and in Belle Glade. They serve Palm Beach County families. It's a local nonprofit organization. and they actually start serving our students before they're born. They work with mothers prenatal and then postnatal through 1.5 years old. And then they follow the families. They work on housing, attaching them to health services where they need it. And then rather than positioning themselves in specific schools, they work in the schools where they have children. So it's just an incredible organization. And if you ever see any kind of request to volunteer or to contribute to Families First, know that you're contributing to our students' families. And finally, for this time, yesterday, I had the great opportunity to give awards to the elementary, across our entire district, elementary and middle school students who participate in our academic games. I got to give the awards to the mathematics students. The entire John I. Leonard, not auditorium, cafeteria, which by the way is an awesome cafeteria, the John I. Leonard cafeteria was filled with these elementary and middle school kids, along with their parents, playing mathematics. From 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock, they were just into doing their academic math games. It was so very cool. And then my last point is to talk about the teacher sponsors. They were there from before 4 to after 7 with their students. They coach these students, their school teams in their schools. And this is another example of what our Palm Beach County teachers do above and beyond, highly underpaid for all they do. But I wanted to point out again how enthusiastic and how much we appreciate all they do for our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Whitfield, Mrs. Brill, Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. On last Thursday, we had an exciting time, and many of the board members were with me. We did the Go Teach grants with the Education Foundation at Kaiser University. It was an exciting, glittering time. Mr. Oswald, you were up there on the stage with the spotlight on you, but the big stars of the evening were all of those teachers receiving that money for their grants. They had written grants for their school to improve instruction, and we want to thank the Ed Foundation. You're outstanding. You're fabulous. All of the board of directors for the Education Foundation. I felt like we were all in Hollywood because all of the lights and the brightness of the event, the pictures that were taken, I hope we have them on the website because it was an exciting evening. And lastly, I want to say on yesterday, I had a chance to visit Woodlands Middle School, and it was National Custodians Day. I got a chance to see some of the custodians and shake their hands, and I'm hoping that I'll continue to do that when I visit schools. And we know that they make a difference in what our schools look like and feel like for our children, and we appreciate them being a part of our family. So thank you, custodians, for all you do everywhere for the School District of Palm Beach County, our children, our adults, for everybody. You help us to do our best every single day. Congratulations.
Mr. Barbieri. Dr. Robinson. All right, thank you. That ends our reports. We now go to agenda item speakers. We have 5, so I'll call 3 at a time. If you'll please come up and use the microphones in the front. Michael Jackson, Kenneth Jackson, and Michael Moskowitz. Mr. Jackson.
Good afternoon. My name is Kenneth Jackson with Covenant Arts Academy, and we're here for hopefully approval today. Just like to thank you for this opportunity, and also the Charter School Department. We've had this opportunity to work with them over the last 3 years. We've applied before, and we've learned a lot through the process, and we feel very, very good about what we've been able to present in application. and we know that the children in the Glades area will benefit from our experience. As a middle school band director for 13 years at Lakeshore Middle School, I had a chance to make impact on quite a few kids. In fact, what I saw was kids coming into the program who may not have had confidence academically as well as in the arts. But after 3 years of being in the band, we saw them change dramatically. And some of those same kids who struggled academically coming in, when they left, they were leaders in all areas of the school. In fact, at Lakeshore, we had more than a fourth of the population in the band program. And so we learned a lot through that process, and since then, we've been running a nonprofit called Street Beat. And we've been very active in the Glades communities, and we've had hundreds of kids every year to go through the program, and many of those young people are doing very well right now. In fact, we have 2 serving on the board of directors. And so we say that to say this: we look forward to working with the population in the Glades area, because many of the children would love to be a part of the School of the Arts in West Palm, but they have to leave at 5 in the morning, and they return at 7 in the evening, and that's when they don't have a performance. So we believe we have a lot of value to add to the community by having a school like Covenant Arts Academy, and the impact they can have not only on the children but their families. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, board members. Also, I'm here to speak on behalf of Covenant Arts Academy. You probably figured out Ken is my older brother. But we come to the table with a lot of experience. And as he mentioned, without being repetitive, we've both served in the school systems in Palm Beach County, and we have at least 25, 30 years of practical experience. I know a lot of things are based on theory, but we're actually been there beating the drums, for lack of a better term, for the last 25 plus years. Also, the experiences that we have in knowing that the arts play a major role in the development, the overall development of children. We both, along with our siblings and relatives throughout the Glades region, had an opportunity to do well academically. And also through the arts, we were able to achieve scholarships to further our education. So all of these things are in mind as we embark on what we're looking to do at Covenant Arts Academy. You know the challenges and the issues in the Glades communities. We look at those as opportunities to excel. Again, we've been around for a while. We've proven ourselves to be successful. I have background in local government as a former city manager and also an elected officials. So we've developed relationships as well along the way that will be supportive in what we're looking to do in the Glades community. So we greatly appreciate your support for this board item today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moskowitz.
Good afternoon, members. Michael Moskowitz. I am counsel for Academic Solutions Academy. We're here today with reference to items CS1 and CS2. With me to my right is Andrew Kinlock, who is the head of ASA, as we call it, who can better address some of the substantive issues that we have that we'd like to talk to you today about. In particular, and we have a written submission which I will hand out before Mr. Kinlock begins his presentation for your review and consideration. Let me say this, ASA submitted 2 charter applications. We reviewed it, we worked with them, we believe that it is complete, complies with Florida statutes and all requirements that need to be contained within a charter application. There was an interview process with your staff in April of 2018. I attended part of that interview process where staff went over some of their questions or concerns. ASA brought its entire team at that time, along with its ESC consultant, answered, addressed all of your staff's concerns, responded to their questions, and certainly we left with the belief that we had adequately and comprehensively responded to all of their concerns and questions. As far as we knew at that time, everything was fine. We had not heard back from staff since that date until we recently received a letter in September of 2018 advising of the denial with certain sections specified as to non-responsive or partially non-responsive, et cetera. So Mr. Kinlock and his staff have prepared a fairly extensive written response, which I will step up and hand to your clerk, your board clerk, for distribution to the members and to council. And obviously, then I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Kinlock, who can more substantively address the issues. We believe we have comprehensively satisfied all of the requirements of Florida statute and all the requirements for the granting of a charter application. We hope that you would take the time to listen to Mr. Kinlock and to review his written presentation and to reconsider the staff recommendation for denial. Even if it means tabling the item today so that you can review this material again, we're happy to come back at another time. We'd prefer to be working with you towards presenting an excellent academy that has 2 locations currently in Broward County and provides just a great facilities to students who need this type of education, who are unable to make it within the standard public school system. We believe that we would be a great attribute to the Palm Beach County school system. We think it would be a tragedy for us not to agree to accomplish that and to be at odds with each other. So we hope that you would reconsider this and grant approval with that. I'll distribute this written material and turn the matter over, with your consent, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Kinlock.
Fine, and our other 2 speakers, one, Mr. Kinlock and Mira Patel. So if you want to come forward too. Thank you.
I'd like to take the time to let the board know that we appreciate you guys allowing us here to speak today. And I want to let you guys know that Academic Student Academy is a very powerful and very, in terms of how we work with and how we deal with students. We've been operating in Broward County now for the past 7 years. We have great results. In fact, our last 2 graduates, valedictorian, received a full presidential scholarship to Nova College. We operate a little bit different than some schools that say they do a blended learning. What we do is we actually we integrate the school digital system along with the student information systems, and it allows our parents to actually know exactly where our students are every single day regarding their academics. So we really combined the true essence of blending, where students are allowed to work on their own and at the same time receive some direct instructions. So when we submitted this application, we were convinced that we address all the matters, and some of the questions that you will review if you look at the letter, you'll see that you are receiving partial denial on things like, I didn't understand what your hierarchy chart was in terms of your organization. It's a simple chart. So for a reviewer that didn't understand that, to me, it just didn't make any sense. And on the first note, if you look at my very first bullet on that letter, you'll see that another issue that they had questions. We didn't know where the references were. Well, the application is only 110 pages. And initially, I had it at 151. So in reducing it, certain things had to be omitted. So a lot of the issues that relates to partially met the standards have no substance. And if you review the letter, and if you guys would take the time to even listen to the tape, you'll see what I'm saying. It needs to be looked at by the board more in depth. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Patel.
Thank you. Again, thank you so much for having us up here. I would like to request the board to review the items so that you are also aware that Academic Solutions Academy has provided over the past 7 years a great benefit to the Broward County community, and we would also like to do that up here in Palm Beach County. We have historical information. Speaking with, I know one of our portions that we were denied on was the budget. However, we've been financially sound for the past 7 years in Broward County, and we feel that we can continue doing the same thing up here. So I request that you re-review the application or side bench it till next time so that we can have the opportunity to go over some of the questions that they needed clarity on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes our speakers, so we'll move to the consent agenda. We had 7 items pulled. Anybody want to pull any other items? Mr. Barbieri.
Mr. Shaw, depending on what the board does with LD1, I can't see now. The one we discussed, we're going to discuss what we did in the closed session. I may want to put the other ones back on consent, the applications for charters, the denials, and the approvals. I had pulled them all. So I guess we can reorder the agenda.
You want to ask to take LD1, the new business item, out of order?
You can move to reorder the agenda, but all those are on new business, so they're going to come up one at a
Right.
time anyway.
Okay, well,
All
I
right.
would, okay. So you want to go ahead and
Yeah,
take
can
this
we-
one?
yeah, can we
There's
move-
a motion by Mr. Barbieri to take LD1, a legal item, out, second by Dr. Robinson. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. So we'll move to one item of new business at this time, and that's the LD1. Dr. Fenoy.
Yes, LD1, I recommend the board authorize the general counsel to file an appropriate motion with respect to the 4th District Court of Appeals, September 27, 2018, ordering SDPBC versus Renaissance Charter School, Inc., case number 4D17-2539, Florida 4th DCA, and authorize the general counsel to sign all necessary documents.
All right, Ms. Rico, can you give us a brief, so the public knows what we're doing on this one?
We're seeking direction as to having the board direct general counsel to pursue post-hearing matters with respect to this case after the ruling from the opinion from the 4th DCA, which dealt with this case, and any appropriate appeals or post-order motions.
Okay, and for the public, this was the issue that the board talked about in our attorney-client session. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. So we'll go back to the consent agenda, and Mr. Barbieri, do you want to?
Yeah, Mr. Shaw, I'm not sure exactly how to do this, but I think I'd like to make a motion to postpone the applications, both the approvals and the denials of the charters, other than the name change, to the December 5th meeting, so that we can get clarification on our legal status from the courts as to whether or not we have authority. It appears as though the court sided with us that we do have the ability to make charter school policies, and those policies seem to include our ability to approve and deny charters for various reasons. And as a second point, for purposes of discussion, I'd like the board, the superintendent may call a workshop to discuss what we can and can't do, including, recently it's obviously come to all of our attention that the state board is overly concerned and has, taken an intense look at the capacity issues in the district with respect to approving new public schools. The state board will be the first one to tell us that charter schools are public schools, and they've been holding off on approving 3 new public schools for us in this district, but yet, we're sitting here approving charter schools, which are public schools that are going to add more capacity to what the state apparently considers already overcapacity in Palm Beach County. So I'd like us to have an opportunity to discuss that and whether or not we should continue down this path of approving charters on those issues and other issues, because the state board obviously feels it's very important not to have too many classrooms empty in the public school system, and charter schools are public schools. So I'm making a motion to move all of them to the December 5th meeting.
So that's CS 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7, correct?
Seven
Or
is the
not
name.
7.
7 is the name change.
Name change. So 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6, the motion is to move them to the December 5th meeting. Is there a second? Second by Mrs. Andrews. Mrs. Brill.
Thank you. And on 2 of the denials, the main area that they're not in compliance is ESC. So for me, I'm prepared to deny them right now, because that's something that we are allowed to deny on, has nothing to do with the issues that we were discussing.
Okay. Mrs. Andrews?
And I'm prepared to vote on Covenant's Arts Academy today. When I look at the Glades and the arts schools and the Glades, there's very few and far between. I do know the record of the speakers and the kind of work that they do for arts. It's a blessing to have something like this. So I'm ready to vote tonight for the Covenant Arts Academy.
All right, I saw Ms. Rico. When we do vote on this one, we'll take each one
One at a
as
time.
an individual item. Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. I'm fine with taking them one by one. I wanted to actually say the same thing Mrs. Andrews said, but a bit for a different reason. So when people would ask me about charter schools, and I would talk about this charters, in my mind, need to fill a niche, I would always use the example of an arts program in the Glades. Now, I am so glad somebody's stepping forward to provide that, because we are not. Right? And the children in the Glades deserve to have access to arts programming. And so I'm glad we're going to take them one by one so I can support the Covenant Arts Academy.
Right, any other discussion? If not, we will, the first one is CS1, move this one to December 5th. All in favor? I saw a question look. Anybody had a question on that one? All right, all in favor? All opposed? Motion of moving it to, the motion is to move it to December 5th, to table this item until December 5th. Mrs. McQuinn.
I'm sorry, I really was following this carefully. So correct me if I'm wrong. I am in favor of moving forward with the denial of an application based on the information that we've been given. So I don't know what we need to do to revise or revisit the recommendation.
I think probably the simple thing is, if you want to vote on it today, the way it is, just vote against the motion to
Gotcha,
move it
thank
to
you.
December 5th. So all we're doing is asking which ones do you want to move to December 5th? Mrs. Whitfield.
May I just ask this question to our attorney about these specifically? Maybe you can't answer this, but if the ruling from the courts is sustained, then we wouldn't have the ability to deny this one?
No.
No, we can always deny, but we
You're
may get
deni-
overturned.
You're making the decision at this time, and at this time, this particular denial has to do with other factors than was addressed in that case.
Great, thank you.
All right, any other questions? So to make sure that we're clear, what we're voting on is CS1, and that is the motion to table until December 5th. So if you want to table it, the motion would be in the affirmative. If you want to vote on it today, vote no. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand so that we know what we got. Looks like that was an easy one. All
Obviously,
those
I lost that
opposed,
one, so I wasn't going to
take
put my
it
hand
back.
up, so it's fine.
So far, Mr. Barbieri, you're 0 for 1.
0 for 1, that's
Number
good.
2. CS2, so the vote there would be 7-0 against the motion, with all 7 board members voting against it. And so that'll go back on when we approve the total consent agenda. So the second one is CS2. The motion was to table it until December 5th. All in favor? All opposed?
Frank's 0 for 2.
Let the record show 7 opposed. CS3 was withdrawn. CS4, approval of the new application motion was to move it to December 5th. Mrs. Whitfield.
Okay, so I understand why moving it to December 5th, if it was a denial, would make sense, but for an approval, why does it matter if we move it to December 5th, since we were already going to approve it?
Mr. Barbieri.
Well, I mean, there's, obviously, the legal status has something to do with it, but also, I mean, I just want to remind the board, we've been waiting almost 1 year for the State Board of Education to approve 3 new public schools, and they're concerned with capacity, so concerned that they sent down people from the state to look at our transportation system and figure out why we can't move kids from down at the south end of the county to the central part of the county because we have capacity there. So unless these charter schools can tell us where they are, I think we're doing the state board's work by denying charter schools that are just going to add capacity to a system that they say already has too many classrooms. So I would like us to have an opportunity to workshop this and discuss it before we vote on approving another charter school. Other than I've heard what my colleague said about the one in the Glades, and I will back off on that one because it's obviously there's a need there. So I have no issue with that one. But these other ones,
ones that just do what we do and add classrooms to an already over-capacity system according to the state doesn't seem to make much sense to me.
All right, Mrs. Whitfield?
Thank you. So I'm not trying to beat this dead horse, but I feel like we went down this road 4 years ago, and it's been an arduous road, though valid, and I'm very proud of our work on it. I would just maybe say that we shouldn't talk about the reasons why if we are going to go forward with this right now.
I think that's probably a good point.
Just
So, Ms. Rico.
point of information, this is, as I understand it, this motion is simply to table it to a time certain, so there are no denials, approvals, no basis, no nothing. It's just a matter of postponement.
All right, so to make sure, since this one is an approval, if you'd like to delay this until December 5th, this one, you would vote for the tabling. Any questions? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. The next item is CS5 Covenant. The motion here is to table this until,
Mr. Shaw, I'll withdraw my motion on this one.
okay, that amendment was withdrawn. And number 6 is the approval of Somerset Academy. Again, this one, if you want to delay it until December 5th, you'd vote for it. Any questions? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All right. Mr. Barbieri, you did okay. You're batting 500 on this one today. So, all right, so that the public realizes what we did was that there was a motion to delay some charter school applications until December 5th. 2 of those will be delayed until December 5th, and that's CS4 and CS6. Right, Mrs. Bass? We got that? And then CS1, 2, and 5 are back on the consent agenda. So now we're back on the consent agenda.
7.
Is there anybody that?
7.
And 7 is already, but that one wasn't being talked about because that was the name change item. All right, so we're back on the consent agenda with CS4 and CS6 added back onto consent. Is there, anybody want to pull any other items? Dr. Robinson?
4 and 6 are going to the.
They're just back on consent now, where they originally were. Yeah, are there, yeah, yeah. All right, so, well, Mr. Barbieri, you had, officially, you hadn't, were they pulled to be put on new business before the meeting?
Yes, they're on new business.
Okay, and the other 2? That's up to Mr. Barbieri, you pulled them.
Fine, it's fine.
All right, just leave them on consent?
Yes.
All right. So on our consent agenda on the charter schools, CS1 is left on consent, CS2 is on consent, CS3 are on new business. All right, CS3 has been withdrawn. CS4, Mr. Barbieri said leave it on consent. CS5.
No.
No,
All on new business?
all on new business.
All in new business, okay. All right. All the charter school items are in new business then, that we talked about, except for 7. And 4 and 6 are tabled and off until December 5th.
1, 2,
Okay.
and 6 we need to.
1,
I'm sorry, 1, 2, and 5 we need to vote on.
yes. Yeah, 1, 2, 5, and then 7 that we hadn't talked about. All right, anybody want to pull anything else?
We did enough damage already. Let's move on.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Mrs. McQuinn, second by Mrs. Andrews. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? All right, so we move now to the new business part of the agenda. And our first item now will be CS1.
Chairman Shaw, I recommend the board deny the application for Academic Solutions Academy for any and all the reasons stated by the evaluation instruments and the overall assessment, and authorize the superintendent and his or her designee to sign all related correspondence and documents.
Is there a motion? Motion by Dr. Robinson, second by Mrs. Whitfield. Any discussion? Just a comment, if this is denied, the applicants can always come back next year with the application. So, any discussion? All in favor, all opposed, motion carries 7-0. CS2.
CS2, I recommend the board deny the application of Academic Solutions Academy B for any and all reasons stated by the evaluation instruments and the overall assessment, and authorize the superintendent and his or her designee to sign all related correspondence and documents.
Motion by Dr. Robinson, second by Mrs. Brill. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, all opposed, motion carries 7-0. CS4 is
Five.
the one, well, CS4 is the one that's been delayed, so we're at CS5.
CS5, I recommend the board approve the application of Covenant Arts Academy for any and all the reasons stated by the evaluation instruments and the overall assessment, and authorize the superintendent and his or her designee to sign all related correspondence and documents.
Motion by Mrs. Andrews, second by Mrs. Brill. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, all opposed. Mr. Jackson, we just voted 7-0 for your school. Good luck. All right. CS6 is another one that has been taken off and moved to December 5th. CS7.
I recommend the board approve the First Amendment to the charter contract with Renaissance Charter School at North Palm Beach doing business as Renaissance Charter School at Palms West, and authorize the superintendent and his or her designee to sign all related contracts and documents.
Is there a motion? Motion by Mrs. Andrews, second by Mr. Barbieri. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, all opposed. Motion carries 7-0. Next item, Dr. Fenoy.
Yes, DS1, MOU with Children's Services Council of Palm Beach County. I recommend the board approve the memorandum of agreement with the Children's Services Council of Palm Beach County to provide behavior and mental health services for students, and authorize the chairman and superintendent to sign all needed documents.
And this was the one that we talked about for good cause. Motion by Mrs. Andrews, second by Dr. Robinson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, all opposed, motion carries 7-0. Mrs. Whitfield.
I just think I should take a moment of privilege on this one, and it's probably more for Dr. Robinson to talk about, since that's one of the committees she serves on. But I would like to say a particular thank you to CSC, because I think this is a huge collaboration from them on some of the work that we really desperately needed done. So I would just like to say to everyone who worked on this and is continuing to work on this, a massive thank you. I think it's really, really something wonderful for our community. I just want to take that moment. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor, all opposed, motion carries 7-0. LD1 was the item we already took action on, and P2, Dr. Fenoy.
Yes, sir, P2. I recommend the board approve the attached list of out-of-field, out-of-compliance teachers for Survey 2 for FY19 school year.
Is there a motion? Motion by Mrs. Brill, second by Mrs. Whitfield. In discussion, I brought this up in the past. If you look at that list, the majority of people in that list, and for anyone who's been a principal knows the impact that the ESOL courses have on teachers. It's 400 hours of instruction, and most of that can be handled through our staff development programs and accomplish the same thing. So I'd like to ask that at some point in time, staff look at how we can revisit that issue and not impact teachers with this, because it's a tremendous amount of work that quite honestly does not have the benefit that teachers should be getting from this. Mrs. Andrews?
And I don't know if Dr. Fenor or someone needs to come up and talk about this one. I did look at the out-of-field agreement, and I saw quite a few out-of-fields in Title I schools, and I just want to know, what is the plan of action? When we're giving out unassigned contracts, are we specifically trying to work to make sure that we cover those schools first before, we just give them out to other schools? I know everyone would love to have an unassigned contract teacher in their school, but when I look and I see quite a few of the Title I schools with the out-of-fields. I just wanted to know what process are we doing to take care of those schools first in the recruiting process?
Yeah, Dr. LaCava, you can come forward and speak to that.
Good afternoon, school board members. I'm going to have Kim Porto specifically answer that question because she works with our out-of-compliance and out-of-field teachers.
Hi, good evening. With the out-of-field, we do target the unassigned contracts to go towards the Title I students, or the Title I schools, sorry. But we are finding that we are struggling to fill positions everywhere in every type of school. And as soon as we get the schools filled and the teachers in the Title I schools in compliance, they've met their 3 years, and then they're moving on, they're voluntarily transferring, they are going to other places, which is making the non-Title I schools in compliance, and then we're seeing it being cyclical again back to the Title I schools where they're having, that constant turnover for the teachers that are out of field. And we have to be as creative as we can at this point in time to make sure that the schools are staffed with people that really want to be there to service our children.
Dr. Robinson?
So just so that I'm not misinterpreting, would you define what out-of-field is, what that means?
So out of field, in the most simplest term, means that the teacher certification does not match the certifications that the state says they need for that specific course code that they're teaching. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're not able to teach the content. What it means is that they're not certified by the state.
I'll follow up.
Dr. Robinson?
And so if we have, is there punishment to the school district for having teachers who are teaching out of field?
Only if we, one, don't get the list approved by the board, and then if we don't follow up with the out-of-field letters that go home to the parents, and that information that is shared with the schools. So we have the bulletin that just came out in regards to out-of-field. The parent letters are going to go out next week, and they have to go home by date certain for FTE, and we do that for Survey 2 and for Survey 3.
Okay, and one more. And so I brought this up a bit in our retreat, right? So what I really want to see is some studies that would tell me that having a teacher who is certified in the area that they're teaching in really accelerates student achievement, right? I mean, I guess we would assume that that is true, but I want to know that that's true because I have examples to the contrary. So in one of my schools, the teacher who I'm told, had the highest scores on whatever that first quiz thing is, that I don't get these acronyms straight, whatever it was, that she cannot pass the certification test in the subject area that she's teaching yet in this school that has this reputation for being troubled, she had the highest scores on this initial test, right? So I need a correlation. I know in medicine it's not true, right? So I need to know if there's a correlation in education. The other thing is I would like to have a follow-up, maybe at least starting in a memo form. I don't know if we need to workshop it, but what I understand to be changes in the testing in the past couple years so that now we have increasing numbers of people who are unable to pass the test. Some of them have already proven themselves in the classroom, right? And so it's something changed with the test. And then also this situation with, and Dr. LaCava knows the example I'm talking about. I'm not going to name the teacher, but what courses you have to have taken in college in order to walk down that path to, because this one particular young man can't seem to get a job anywhere because he didn't take the right classes in college, yet he has a bachelor's and he's doing a good job in the school. And it is just something really ridiculous about this whole thing to me. It's like we've lost sight of what we're supposed to be trying to do, and that's putting people who first have the heart for children, because I swear, if we hire the heart, we can professionally develop the rest. And I'm just getting tired of the bureaucracy getting more and more in the way. So I just want to get that correlation and then that information so we can figure out as a board if we want to try to be a vanguard in this area as well.
And Dr. Robinson, that is a state crosswalk, not a Palm Beach regulation. So I just want to make sure when I write the memo to the board, I'll explain that as well, that it's not our regulation, it's a state crosswalk. for that gentleman's classes.
Okay, okay, so I got that, and then for whatever the rules are, tell us the repercussions if we break the rules.
And, you know, in many cases, if you look at that list, it could be, and I will call on Mrs. McQuinn to answer this one, because she had a lot of experience at the high school level. But this could be something as simple as a teacher who's certified in biology and physics, but doesn't have a certification in chemistry. But in a high school, when you're doing your master board, so Mrs. McQuinn, would you like to address that issue?
Okay, well, yeah, that's not a very good example, though. Okay, so yeah, it's true. Sciences are difficult because you do have to, I mean, you can have general science, but you have to have chemistry or physics specifically or biology specifically. So science is a tougher one, so we can, you know, we go to mathematics is a little bit easier to handle because I'm 9 through 12. But I want to reiterate with Dr. Robinson, and this came up at our retreat, I know, well, I don't know all of them, but I know that the state puts requirements on us regarding certification, and that's part of, I don't want to jump ahead with this, but we've got to get something. We talked about ways to have alternative certification, which I know we've had in the past, and I think we, Palm Beach County, need to get ahead of this, because if a principal wants to hire a person with a degree, a bachelor's degree, and as a district, we're providing in-service on teaching strategies. If a principal evaluates a teacher as doing a good job, let's say, for example, 3 years, and really what does it matter, because now, you know, we can let a teacher go after 1 year. So what do we have to lose by getting ahead of the game and letting some people with bachelor's degrees in our classrooms under close supervision? And we talked about that, and I'm hoping that we make this important because, remember, a lot of people don't go in, sorry, but I have to do this. A lot of our kids are not going into colleges of education because they don't see dollars at the end of the line. But you know what? They graduate, they don't get another job, they start substituting. That's what I did. And you say, wow, I love this. And so somebody has the nerve to hire you, you know, out of field or whatever, temporary certificate. And then you end up, look, I ended up being an excellent teacher. So I know that's long-winded, but please let's do something about this, and let's let it be more in the hands of our principals saying, this person under my supervision has done an excellent job of teaching kids. I hope that makes some kind of sense.
And the important part there is also the fact that we could be looking at a list of teachers that this is impacting somebody for one period a day and not their entire day. Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you, and I certainly agree with you, Mrs. McQuinn, but I can tell you, when I worked in personnel, I started the alternative certification program. Kim can tell you that. So I do believe in the alternative path, but when I look at our schools on that lowest 100 list, as well as those schools that are in trouble right now, I just really am careful about who's in the classroom actually teaching the children, because it starts there first. So I did look at that list, and I am talking to the principals and visiting the schools to make sure that we have the right people there. But yes, I do agree that we do need to have alternative pathways, and that's something that I did for 20 years. Thanks.
Any other questions? Seeing Dr. Robinson?
Okay, so we're just running down this street. So also, can we follow up on if we can use that artist in residence concept in the academic areas? And also, if we are actively recruiting people for, I can't think of the word, like shared positions, like each of us work half-time?
Sharing.
What
Job
is it?
sharing.
Job sharing.
Okay, job sharing, that's it. So are we actively using that to bring people into, and these would be skilled people, you know, people with life experiences in their area. And can you also find out, and this might be a bit much, but of the people who are not passing these certification tests, how many of them got bachelors through colleges of education? Because my theory is that the non-traditionals are passing it at a higher rate, but I can't prove that. And then lastly, back in the olden days, and Mrs. Andrews would remember, we had the AAA plan, Accelerating Academic Achievement, which specifically set forth that we would staff our high-need schools first. They got first priority, and it was like blocked out, I don't remember the period of time, so that we could make sure that we got the quote, cream of the crop with the students that needed them the most. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Mr. Shaw?
Mr. Barbieri.
So if we can get a consensus from the board, I'd like to ask the superintendent to hold a workshop as soon as possible. I looked at November 17th as a date to discuss factors for charter school applications and approvals, including the most recent major factor, which the State Board of Ed has brought to our attention, and that is that capacity is a major factor in approving new public schools in this county, and the State Board has made it absolutely clear to us that charter schools are public schools, so we should probably look at their guidance on how they want us to approve schools in this county and not increase the capacity. So I'd like to, if the board's willing to have a
Yes,
workshop.
Mr. Oswald and his team will be willing to do that for you,
Thank
along
you.
with the charter school group.
Thank you.
That concludes our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mrs. Andrews, second by Mrs. Whitfield. All in favor, all opposed? And to Mr. Howard and Dr. Robinson, again, happy birthday.